The sea is often considered the source of life for our planet. Our ancestors used the ocean for not only travel, but for finding food, navigation, study, leisure, and many other things besides. But with its vast depths, the oceans have always held many mysteries, some haunting, others fascinating, and some beyond the realm of plausibility. Merpeople could be considered all three of these. Appearing in fantasy stories and fairy tales for generations, merfolk have captured the hearts of young girls and fantasy writers for years. But how would they exist? Would they endure the many centuries of humanity's travel and expansion? How would they associate with the ancient human world? Let's talk about it. This is Fantastical History. Firstly, it's important to note what a mermaid or merman is by definition. Merpeople are seafaring creatures with the lower body of a fish and the upper body of a human. As a general rule, merpeople are capable of breathing air, if only for short periods, making them akin to mudskipper fish. Movies like The Little Mermaid have encouraged a modern conception that mermaids are beautiful, have lovely voices, and have a flair for the romantic. Indeed, certain interpretations like Marrow from Everyday Life with Monster Girls implies that mermaids are quite fond of things like tragedy. Since the barrier between the ocean world and land world keeps their cultures apart, tragic romance and arrangements are quite common, and thus their culture strives for it.
Well, it's embarrassing, but the story of the Little Mermaid is quite popular among my kind. My people have a bit of a soft spot for tragic romance. In fact, I enjoy attending operas and plays about unrequited love.
Yet other interpretations paint them as dangerous and even man-eating, implying they lure men to their deaths, which is likely inspired from the myth of the sirens, water nymphs who sing beautiful songs that lure sailors onto rocky shoals who wreck their ships and then die. As you can see, the myths of mermaids can range from haunting to mystifying.
Oh, how sweet. Are mermaids not sweet?
They'll sweetly drown you if you get too close.
But where can we find truth? If merfolk are as intellectual and intelligent as humans, then it stands to reason they would range on the scale of morality about as much as any other human. But being fish, we can assume they have developed social skills since many fish do swim in schools and groups. It's highly likely merfolk would have established social groups to live with. However, one thing we can likely rule out is a spoken language. It's almost impossible to speak underwater without some kind of technological assistance, and since mermaids could not have done this, they likely evolved to speak in an unknown sonar or clicking language like dolphins or fish that could be used underwater.
Hook has your brothers.
This means that attempts to communicate between humans and merfolk would be very difficult. Now, being sea dwellers, it stands to reason they likely are carnivorous by nature, eating fish, eels, octopus, and other living creatures to sustain themselves. It is possible that they eat sea vegetation, but the sea doesn't provide much variety in this regard. Would they eat human food? It's possible, and the realization that humans possess commodities they could use and eat would lead merfolk to interact with humans more readily. Consider how aliens from outer space might treat humans if they learned humans had items or products they wanted. It would be quite similar. However, the difference is that mermaids and humans have a barrier, the ocean. While mermaids might be exceptional swimmers and sea dwellers, on land their tails are useless and thus would be incapable of leaving the water for long, if at all. And humans, while adept on the land, lose all advantages when in the water, and it is this barrier that will make things very strained. Now, in one of my stories, Monster Club, I created a mermaid named Calypso, who explained that some mermaids had learned to turn their fins into makeshift legs to walk on land, but exposure to water would revert them back to fins, not like a natural reflex like sweating or blinking. In one piece, it's explained that when a mermaid reaches around 30 years old, their tail splits down the middle so they can walk on land.
Just to educate you boys, when we mermaids get to be about 30 years old, our tail fin forks in two and we can walk on land like a regular old human. If you ever make it out to Fishman Island, you'll see what I'm talking about.
Certain worlds and creations have tried to find ways to bridge the gap between the ocean and the land by giving merfolk new ways of reaching the land. But as a general rule, the fins of merfolk have kept them at a good distance away. In previous episodes of the series, we've talked about how other races and species would live among humans. But with merfolk, it might be more accurate to ask how humans would live with them. See, travel was crucial for human development and trade, and early sailing vessels would have been easily at the mercy of a school of merfolk with weapons. If a gang of merfolk dwelled near a harbor or docking area, even leaving the docks might be a matter of negotiation and trade. fishing would become highly difficult for merfolk's own waters than you choose to fish in. Even playing in the water or going to the beach might be a risky business. In a frightening way, merpeople might be one of the few races in fantasy who could dictate the terms of our survival. We need access to the sea for trade, to eat, and travel, and if the merfolk aren't willing to play nice, then that makes things all the more difficult. In today's society, our ships, access to aircraft, and highly more advanced technology would certainly give us a better edge against the creatures. But for our ancestors, who were limited only to sailing vessels made of wood, that could be an incredible problem. Rudders are destructible. Holds are quite easily punched through the ship bottoms with the right tools, and keels can be damaged. On fishing boats, men and fish alike can be yanked underwater and into the deep by unhappy merpeople. In recent years, it's become far more popular to envision the dark interpretation of mermaids, beautiful and inviting, true, only to turn into monsters or killers in disguise. Now, it might not be this way in reality. Humanity would realize quickly that merfolk dictate our travel, and we have no means of warring with them. Merpeople at the same time would realize that the surface world has much to offer in terms of trade. The only possible solution, therefore, is barter, trade, and negotiation. Since mermaids might not have an understandable human language, interpreters would have to be trained to deal with them. And then it's a matter of trading with, or appeasing, the merfolk. But that begs one more serious question. What do we have that they want? Humanity has the capability to produce material goods and refine them. We also have access to more diverse and broad forms of meats, vegetables, and fruits. While merfolk might not be like Ariel and want to be human themselves, the products and creations of humans would likely interest them to some degree. For example, jewelry might be something highly sought after by merfolk. Jewelry is something likely only humans could craft, as there is no feasible way to mine gems under the sea and then smelt, craft, and create jewelry underwater. Also, steel or iron products for tools or weapons would be impossible to build underwater. Any that were salvaged from sunken ships would rust over time, and thus they would need more readily available. Now, you might be wondering, why would merfolk want weapons? Because there's a fact about the merfolk we might want to keep in mind. It's very easy for us to assume that merfolk would all just live as one big collective and never squabble or argue. But that flies in the face of reality. It's very likely that merfolk would form individual clans, schools, or communities that would likely compete for resources, hunting grounds, and places of trade. These feuds would lead likely to merfolks warring with each other, and to be more capable of warfare, merfolk will need weapons. And what better weapons than ones made of steel, provided by humans? In fact, we could probably look as far back as ancient Greece and see mermaid societies that inhabit different coasts along the Mediterranean. We could see different coastal Greek city-states trading goods with mermaids in exchange for guiding their ships to ports across the sea. Imagine a merfolk escort for your ship to prevent getting lost or attack from other merfolks. Imagine the wars between Rome and Carthage, and consider how much easier it would have been for Carthage to reach Rome had merfolk offered them safe and protection during their travel to Europe. And imagine how much easier Yi Sun Shin's battles against the Japanese would have been had merfolk been on Korea's side. Ocean battles and sea wars would come down to who the merfolk favored. And certainly one merman alone might not be enough to truly sink a ship, but an entire school could cause damage to a ship quite easily. We can't assume the merfolk are weak after all. The ability to move fast and freely under the water and withstand the crushing ocean depths means that they are likely very durable and have strong bodies in order to resist the ocean's resistance. In a sea engagement, no side could probably make a move until it's clear who the merfolk favor in the battle, and that knowledge might actually dissuade the conflict. I personally get mental images of a sailing vessel as merfolk launch themselves out of the water, grabbing sailors off the edge of boats and dragging them back into the sea, or merfolk carrying axes, hacking away at the rudders of ships, or even using their strength to push enemy ships into reefs or shoals. And while the sailors shoot blindly at the water to try to fight off the merfolk, your own ships are safe to launch cannon fire. And while we're on this note of sea warfare, it's not likely merfolk would be able to swim out into open ocean, at least not to dwell in. It's far more likely that merfolk make their dwellings in reefs and more moderately deep areas. To live out in the open ocean where the ocean is at its deepest would offer no living area or place of rest. Plus, it fully exposes them. Not a great outlook. That means that if ships were to start sailing between Britain and America, for example, there would be a cutoff point where merfolk would not be able to follow, or at least be unwilling to. It wouldn't make too much of a difference for the role merfolk play in eventual ocean travel. Now, of course, as in all things, there will be misunderstandings, miscommunications, and possibly even some reprehensible activities committed. There's no doubt that mermaids would be seen as valuable creatures, capable of being sold, and this would likely be the activity of certain people, especially in the slave trade. However, considering how the merfolk would feel about such behavior, these actions would quickly become illegal and punished severely. Hurting working relationships with merfolk by catching and selling their kind would be nothing short of an act of sabotage to the country from who the person is from. In the modern day, merfolk would most certainly be able to survive. Mankind lacks the necessary power to fully exterminate them, even if we wanted to, and that's a big if. Mermaids would play such a vital role in the history of humanity that we'd likely grow to, if not rely on them, to at least value them. Even as our technology progresses and our reliance on them withers away, their presence is a source of remembrance and reverence. It would be because of their doing and their willingness to aid humanity that we are able to reach the heights we do in the first place. With their help, we could unlock new mysteries of the ocean, and in turn, help them better understand the surface world. Perhaps in time they could develop a human form of communication, if they were so inclined, of course. And while it may seem silly to trade perishable goods to creatures that live underwater, if the merfolk can breathe air as well as water, they could always certainly congregate on rocks, reefs, shoals, or even docks to enjoy the goods they are given, like food or jewelry. Some mermaids, like Mero, might attempt to ride around on wheelchairs in order to better interact with the human world. Merfolk would be very popular for beachgoers, or perhaps divers. Aquatic engineers and researchers might rely on merfolk for research, discovery, and guidance. Special laws would be put in place to protect their habitat, and merfolk might be instrumental in finding good oil deposits for offshore oil drilling, and even able to help in cleaning or caring for ocean life for biologists and animal shelters. The ocean is a world of mysteries. We've barely discovered a fraction of the life and depths within it. Merfolk could be the missing link between our world and that world. While it's unclear of what kind of disposition they might have, or what kind of changes they might make in our society, two things are clear. If they existed, merfolk would dominate the sea for our ancestors, and it would be them who dictate the extent of our expansion. And finally, they would certainly follow us into the modern age. And I believe it would probably be a mutually beneficial arrangement. Thank you guys for watching this episode of Fantastical History, and I will see you in my next video.